Hello and welcome to the Voice Extra podcast. Today I am here with Tom Inniss and we are here to talk about Tenet. So, Tom, would you like to give them kind of like a plot description, I guess?
No. I mean, how can you? I'll use the IMDb one, which is armed with only one word, Tenet, and fighting for the survival of the entire world. A protagonist journeys through a twilight world of international espionage on a mission that will unfold in something beyond real time.
Yeah. The description maybe like overstates the degree to which the film actually inverts reality, but that's mostly it, and the plot doesn't get much more interesting than that. This protagonist, who is literally called the protagonist, is played by John David Washington, and he's kind of like giving a very movie star performance. He's very much giving you like a male lead kind of thing. It's very standard, I guess, but it's good. I like it. And I think anyone who can deliver the line, I'm the protagonist, twice without like laughing is a good actor in my book.
Yeah, I would agree with that. He delivered a good performance with what he had.
Yeah. There were so many corny one-liners, all that. It was bad. Apparently,
It
I
was
think
so
he.
bad it was
Yeah.
good.
If this film took itself less seriously, it would be so bad it was good at points. But I think he even did his own stunts.
Couldn't tell you, but like I'm going to diverge slightly from you. I think the film was an enjoyable romp for what it was worth, but as you said, it took itself too seriously, and it thought it was too clever
Yeah,
for delivering and it wrapped itself up in a lot of science that failed to mask what was quite a simple premise, and the twists and the plot turns weren't clever or
yeah.
surprising. They were just like, oh yeah, here we go.
It sounds like with all the Christopher Nolan of it all, with all the mystique he put around it, with everything like that, you'd think this was some sort of world-changing film, and it kind of isn't.
Mm.
It's very much
Even though
like
he sold it as one.
yeah, it's very much just an action blockbuster with a cool premise, which is fine,
Yeah.
but
I
not
mean,
really what
it
it's
was big
supposed.
enough for both of us to risk catching COVID to go and see it in the cinema.
This is fair, but I'll watch anything if I'm allowed to be loud and have opinions online. So
It's the internet, everyone's allowed an opinion, Teo.
yeah, this is true. But I could be informed and all that. But yeah, it was a fun film to watch, even though I wouldn't recommend getting COVID for it.
Yeah. What surprised me, I went when it opened, and there were 7 people in the viewing with me. There were more people watching New Mutants than they were watching Tenet.
See, there were a decent amount of people in my viewing. Uh,
London, innit?
Yeah, I guess so. Um, but yeah, so in this movie, we've got 4 leads. We've got John David Washington as the protagonist. We've already kind of gone over that. We've got Robert Pattinson as Neil. Again, he's like giving a good performance, but there is not much to his character. It kind of just comes and goes. Like he's
Charming, but
charming. He's very charming.
empty.
Like yeah,
Yeah.
Pattinson he has a lot of range, and is very charming in this film. That's less to do with the script and more to do with him, to be honest. Like
Oh, I think the script is actively working against him because
yeah,
it tries to make him all mysterious, but he's not. Because the
yeah,
reason he's acting all mysterious is not to like be a good spy and protect his identity. It's literally so that the twist can be shrouded for a little bit longer.
yeah.
Yeah, and yeah.
And I think there's a weird thing where a lot of the exposition gets dumped onto him. Like
Yeah.
this film has a problem of having a character sit John David Washington down and like talk at him for 5 minutes about how the science works, and it doesn't help that the sound is really badly mixed. You can barely hear
Yeah, I
the
was going to say,
dialogue.
in that 5 minute of exposition, you can hear maybe about a minute and a half of it at a time.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
these exposition dumps are not particularly interesting. There's a whole conversation about the grandfather paradox, which is like the most tropey thing to talk about in a sci-fi in a time traveling film. It's
Yeah,
like
it's A level. It's A level philosophy.
everything. I think I described it somewhere as Nolan feels like he's just read an encyclopedia on time travel and that kind of area of theoretical physics, and is insistent on telling you everything about it. So he'll throw in words like entropy and like um, talk about reversing entropy and oh, we're inverting things and none of the words matter. None of it matters, if I'm honest.
Nobody will do the grandfather paradox better than Futurama.
I mean, yeah, at least this film certainly isn't approaching that. Um,
Yeah. Well, at least Futurama knew what it was
yeah,
and took itself like with the amount of seriousness it could command.
yeah, and this really doesn't.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So
we've got
moving on.
that. We've got Elizabeth Debicki as Kat. She's paired with Kenneth Branagh as the villain of the film, Andrei Sator, who is a Russian arms dealer. And if I say Russian arms dealer in an American film, that's basically his character, and you understand everything about his character through that. And it's a very like cliche performance or a cliche character, and Kenneth Branagh is doing way too much, and it's just like he's trying to give some. Especially, there's a particular monologue in the film where he monologues about being a tiger, and you're just like, please, and it's in this very extra Russian accent, and you're like, please,
See,
Kenneth.
so we've like inside baseball here. This is the second time we're recording this podcast because my internet died, and it's the second time now that I've heard this tiger monologue be mentioned. And I don't even remember
Do
it.
you not remember?
I don't remember it at all. I've been sitting here quietly just trying to think, what was this tiger
It's
monologue?
in the
And it's
this is kind of telling about the film, but it's in the middle of a he has a like so basically the dynamic between him and Elizabeth Debicki as Kat is that he's an abusive husband, both physically and uses the child as a way to control her, and it's like almost the abuse story is handled awfully. Elizabeth Debicki is written character is written awfully. It's very much every trope you could think of, in terms of oh her only real character is motherhood, and it doesn't do it in an interesting way. All of that, and the psychological abuse stuff is almost more interesting. And I say almost by the level of writing in this film, but it's not particularly interesting. But then there's the physical abuse stuff, which is if it wasn't this topic, it is like comically bad. It is like ridiculous how bad it's handled. It's like, oh yeah, this
yeah, it was put in to give them something to do to like try and compound how bad a person Andre is. But it's like, yeah, we get it. He's trying to end the world.
yeah, we don't.
We know he's a bad character. We don't need to see him physically and mentally abuse his wife
Yeah,
to do it. Or if we do, make something of it, try
yeah,
and say something about it, or like use that to supplement her personality and her character rather than that basically being the driving force for her inclusion in this film.
yeah. It's like it's cheap heat for
Cheap heat,
Branagh's
yeah.
character. Like the biggest example of, or one of the easiest examples of that. And yeah, you're right. Basically, the abuse stuff is also partially just like there's no reason for her to be in this film apart from that. Like it just feels like this
I mean,
whole
she has a role
scene.
at
Yeah,
the end of the film, but again, that is driven by her traumas
yeah,
inflicted upon her by him.
and it's very much like for her because her character being in this film does not make sense without the trauma and abuse, and it's like you couldn't figure out any way to make her stick around or to give Elizabeth Debicki's character anything to do in this film without having to invoke abuse in a way that's really flat and bad.
Mm, yeah, and I take issue with how integral she seems to be for the protagonist to do anything. Like the antagonist seems to be motivated quite heavily by saving her or helping her, or like he owes some sort of debt to her. And it's like, you've been brought on to save the world, and you seem to be acting only in the interest of this one character who you've known for a day and have generated as much aggro for almost as the husband.
Yeah, and then the problem is that, like, if this was a film where the characters meant anything and their relationships meant anything, I could at least buy it as a, oh yeah, they really care about each other, and it's this thing where the lead has to figure out whether he wants to save the world or save someone he cares about, and like all that. I could buy it on that slightly cheesy level, but because there's no real sense of character outside of what the performers are giving, you're just like, why do these people care about each other?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it comes down to. Why do these characters care about each other?
And like,
And I don't
yeah,
have an answer,
and it's kind
because
of,
we're told that they
yeah,
do.
we're told, but we're never really, the script never really gives us like them chilling together and being friends or whatever. There's none of that.
Well, they do spend that 2 weeks. They do spend that 2 weeks in a cargo hold, but we can't hear their character development because the mixing's so bad.
Yeah, and then we're never shown any of that. It's just like any time that those sort of moments are going to happen, it's just, oh, we're cutting now. We're having really sharp editing across this two
Really
weeks
sharp
because we don't
editing.
care.
Yeah.
And it's like, you want us to care about these characters, but also have no interest in showing them in a real way. But one of the things which I did actually like, because I didn't hate this film as much as it sounds like I did, was that the time travel looked cool.
Yeah,
It like
I would agree with that.
looks very cool, and the practical effects on a lot of it really work. Like, there's this this fight sequence where you see it going forward in time and you see it in reverse, and as much as you could kind of see it coming, in terms of actually watching it on screen, it was very cool to see.
Oh yeah, I mean, that was the point where I was like, okay, I know exactly how this all pans out now.
Yeah.
When I saw that the first time, but yeah, visually it's stunning, but it's a Christopher Nolan film. You would expect nothing less.
Yeah. And also, like, cinematographer Hoyt van Hoytema is a great like, you've got an all-star team here. There is no reason for this cinematography to be anything other than incredible.
Yeah, I would agree.
And it is. And as we were talking about the sound, I love the score, and I like the way the sound is designed, but not the way it's mixed, if that makes sense.
No, 100%.
Because, like, I like okay, we're just going to be loud here. We're going to have this moment of just intense Ludwig Göransson score. And, like, I'm very here for it. But I would also like to hear what people say.
I was going to say, so was Nolan, because he thought it was more important than being able to hear what was happening.
Yeah.
Or what was being discussed, which would be fine if there weren't so many big periods of exposition dump.
Yeah. And
that were then lost to
I'm
this
going
mixing.
to talk about some, because the sound mixing is a thing which comes up as an issue in a lot of his films. And one thing he said in response to criticism about Interstellar sound mixing in 2014 is, I don't agree with the idea that you can only achieve clarity through dialogue, clarity of story, clarity of emotions. I try to achieve that in a very layered way using all the different things at my disposal, picture and sound. I've always loved films that approach sound in an impressionistic way, and that is an unusual approach for a mainstream blockbuster. But I feel it's the right approach for this experiential film. And I kind of think that that is a nonsense diversion.
I think they're layered wrong. Is the tall and short of it. It's like if you're cutting a video together in Premiere Pro, he's put like the subtitles behind the actual picture so you can't see it. That's what it's like with dialogue and score. It doesn't work.
And I think the thing as well is that if an impressionistic piece of art, you fundamentally learn all you need to know from what is being presented to you. The impressionism doesn't get in the way of you receiving the information or the emotion. It will still have an effect on you, regardless of if you wanted to do a thing where you're saying, I'm conveying an emotion and the dialogue doesn't matter, then the film has to work without the dialogue. This film does not work without the dialogue because the dialogue explains what's going on, because it doesn't make sense if you don't hear the dialogue.
I mean, it doesn't work. It's like like you said, we both enjoyed this film, and it is great to just be on that ride and watch it and have that visual spectacle. But I mean, if he's trying to, and he is trying to, make this very clever
Yeah.
metaphysical film, that doesn't
Yeah.
work
Let me rephrase
if
that.
you
Yeah, you're right.
are not explaining it
It
to
doesn't
people.
it doesn't work on the level that Nolan wants it to work at if you don't understand the dialogue. It works as a silly blockbuster if you don't understand it. Like, I have a friend who watched it in like Spanish and like, still basically understood the same amount. Like, if you're watching it as a silly blockbuster, the dialogue doesn't matter and it works. But if it's meant to be this whole like meditation, and there's a bunch of like pseudo philosophy in there, and it doesn't matter. None of the dialogue
Yeah.
in this film matters, if I'm
Yeah.
frank.
No, it's all about the visual spectacle.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try and say this again and see whether or not. I'm wondering now whether or not I said something so like awful my internet cut me off so it could never be heard. So I'm going to have another go. Has Nolan now reached the point where his films are so spectacular and so visually impressive, but the characters increasingly have limited scope? Is he now on the same sort of level as like Michael Bay?
I would argue that he's been on that a lot of the time. He is on the same level as Michael Bay. It seemed he has a thing where he puts prestige window dressing on his films, as in he operates in the language of prestige film, like in terms of how he presents the films, in terms of who he puts in the films. But when you actually take away all the prestige window dressing, a lot of the time he's just doing very good blockbusters.
Hmm. I like the use of the word prestige as well because that's a 2006 film by
Yep.
Nolan. It's
But
one of
it's
my
like,
favourite films as it goes.
because like for example, Dunkirk, which is the most recent Nolan, I think. Um, as much as the cinematography and the all that stuff in that film is incredible, it's not really a film that says much, and there's not much going on there apart from cinematography. So again, it has like that prestige window dressing. It's like, oh look, this is filmed beautifully, but the film doesn't actually say much.
Hmm.
And I would argue that Nolan is discussed in terms of authorship and prestige film or whatever in a way that isn't entirely earned, at least in a lot of his work.
Yeah, yeah, or it's been earned, but now he's kind of been given a free ride.
Yeah. Like, for example, I think a thing that was consistent in a lot of the criticism of the film, from the people who gave it 5 stars, was like, hey, I didn't understand it, but clearly that means it's really intelligent. And it's like, no.
Oh, yeah,
Because
right.
it is this presumption of, as you're saying, he's given this free pass. It's this presumption that, oh, if I don't understand it, it must be because I'm stupid. And so I'll go watch it 3 times. It's like, no, 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 no. You don't understand it because it's communicated badly. This is not a complicated film. Anytime you don't understand, okay, not anytime, but the majority of the things that aren't obvious in the film are because of bad filmmaking choices,
Yeah,
as opposed to like the sound mixing,
predominantly mixing.
as
Yeah,
opposed to anything actually being complicated. This is, if I wrote this plot on paper, it is very simple.
yeah. I mean, the plot at its very simplest could be described as people at the end of the world want to save the world by going back in time.
Yeah, that's,
But in doing so, will destroy the way of living in the present.
yeah, and it's like that's basically like there is nothing insightful or complicated or anything like that. It's just a blockbuster with prestige window dressing. Like, if this is I think the thing that like gets me is this film would be so much better if Nolan just admitted that,
Hmm.
because then all the
Should Nolan
corny
admit
lines
it,
would
or
work
should
more.
we admit it?
He's no, because I think there's a difference. I think sometimes filmmakers get prestige ness like projected onto them. I think Nolan is trying. He is trying to make this insight, or not insightful necessarily. He's trying to make it this insight, this like prestige thing. Like the way he talks about his film, and the way he writes the film gives the impression of someone who is trying to be smart and trying to show off how smart he is. I don't think this is just critics projecting onto a Nolan film. If you get what I mean.
Yeah. No, I do. I'm just trying to decide whether or not I agree. I think I do. Because there definitely is that sense of him bigging his films up, which is obviously what a director will do until it gets panned, and then they're like, yeah, well, this, that, and the other. He is definitely building up a narrative around his films.
I mean, the primary example of this is with the sound mixing. Every time
Yeah.
Christopher Nolan gets confronted about his sound mixing being bad,
It's an
he
artistic
says
choice.
it's not. Exactly. Every time. Like, this has been a thing for years. Every time he's confronted about it, he says it's an artistic choice. So he clearly thinks he's doing something.
Make better choices, yeah.
And it's just like, no, just accept that you make very good blockbusters and just do that.
You are now a blockbuster filmmaker.
And like, that's fine. And I think it's fine. And it's just this thing where he has to prove how smart he is and how. And to quote one of my notes, which Tom found hilarious before the recording, Nolan is a nerd in the most exhausting way. It's like he has
It's just
to
the use of the word
tell you-
exhausting.
He has to tell you how smart he is, and you're like, 95% of your audience don't care. 99% of your audience aren't physicists. Like, and I don't. And if anything, the way he draws attention to like the science and the physics actually makes you more likely to pick holes in it. Because when I watch a time travel film or time travel piece of media, I am more than willing to accept that we're going to break some of the laws of science to make this work. Yeah. But because he has to keep insisting that it actually works and it's actually scientifically accurate, you start to pick holes and be like, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. If you get what I mean.
But we're not physicists. We don't know if it does or doesn't make sense. I'm certainly not. I don't know what you get up to in your spare time.
I'm not a physicist, but I can almost definitively say there are parts of that film which don't make sense. Because at best it's operating on like an very loose interpretation of particular theories. Like it doesn't feel like he has an in-depth knowledge of how time travel works because no one does. So like,
yeah, which comes back to that Interstellar film. He worked with a theoretical physicist on that, whose name I am completely blanking on, and I apologize to him. But like that physicist insisted that everything in the film have at least some basis in scientific reasoning and logic. And then Nolan would sort of try and push against that, or say he wanted to do something and send the physicist away to try and come up with something that makes it work. And it is very much like trying to bend science to fit around the story, which is fine. But I think you just got to acknowledge that.
Accept that time travel is silly and will always be silly until we know how it actually works.
Yeah, which I don't think we ever will. But yeah, it's a good film. It's fine. It's a good watch. I think this was the film that cinema needed to bring it back out. I don't know how well it's actually doing at the minute.
I think it's doing well for the conditions. Much better than New Mutants.
Oh, bless it. Bless it. Poor little New Mutants.
Yeah, but I don't know. I would also agree. I think it's great spectacle, even though in at points it's doing too much on screen. Like in the climax of the film, there is so much going on that I honestly like zoned out of like the specific things which were happening for like period stretches of time. Do you get what I mean? Like in that climax where there is so much happening.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether or not, like when you say you zoned out, do you mean you just stopped caring and were just again absorbed in that moment rather than trying to actually follow what was going on?
Yes. Like I was watching the film obviously, but what I mean is I was like, I kind of just was like, no, there's no point engaging this climax on like a focus level. I will just let
I'm
it
just going to
wash
take it
over
for what
me.
it is and
Yeah,
enjoy it as it is. Yeah. Well,
yeah,
I think that's the strapline of this film, isn't it?
yeah. Just like let it wash over you, and that'll be good.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Do
uh,
you think you would have received it better if you'd have just watched it on a streaming platform?
no, because I think a lot of it is very reliant on watching it in a cinema because of the spectacle.
Hmm.
It does the same thing as 1917 or Dunkirk did for me, where if I didn't find the spectacle so amazing, I would struggle. Like I would not be able to watch 1917 at home because I don't care about those characters or plot, unless I
Yeah.
have like a
I
really
mean,
cool sound system.
yeah, I'm going to push it back. I'm going to say this was better than 1917.
I mean, it's better than 1917. Yeah, I just mean it's that same thing of a lot of it is reliant on spectacle, and when I'm at home with my little laptop, it's spectacle isn't as much of a factor.
Yeah. No, okay. So, I mean, in a way, then, he was right and accurate that this was a cinema experience and you
I
had to enjoy
completely
it in the
understand why
cinema.
he wanted this to be out in the cinema and not on streaming. Yeah.
Yeah. How long do you reckon it'll be until it hits streaming platforms, given that it isn't making, again, I'm assuming, it definitely can't be making the money that it would be if we weren't
Uh,
in a pandemic?
I don't know. I think it will still take a while because I'm sure Nolan is in. Because do you remember when Warner when it wasn't getting delayed and everyone was very confused, and then Warner Brothers were basically like, "Yeah, Nolan's telling us we can't delay it." um, that was basically the vibe. So I think he'll probably like push them to not put it out on DVD for ages. But we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, that's star power, isn't it? When you can dictate to the studio what you want to do, you
Yeah,
don't
especially when
really
it's a
have many
big
directors that can do
studio.
that anymore.
Like A24 and stuff let people do that, but they're not. They're working with in a very indie space. They're not big blockbusters.
Yeah, it's strange. It's strange. Although maybe now we are going to see a bit of a resurge in directorially led films rather than studio led films.
What makes you say that?
Because the Snyder Cut's coming out, baby! It's coming.
That that's not exactly direct, an example of like auteur shit coming back. That's an example of
Well, it is now, yeah.
uh, H Warner Brothers and
AT&T,
HBO
yeah.
AT&T realizing that they might as well do this thing a ton of fans have been begging them for because they have the footage there and they can just resell a film that they've already made.
Oh, but 4 hours, though.
Yeah, I mean, it's Zack Snyder, so that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, no. The trailer was very, there.
Playing Hallelujah
Yeah.
over is no. It just as a no. I don't even know how to respond to it. It was very nothing as a trailer.
I thought it was an incredibly spiteful trailer. I loved it. It was like, here's a trailer where I'm not going to show a single scene that was in the actual film that was
Yeah,
released.
it is very much
Love
like
it.
look at all these things which are mine.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's gonna be good, but it will be different, maybe somewhat.
Yeah. I'm in it for the spectacle at this point, which
Yeah, I will not be. Yeah, we'll see what happens with that. I don't know. I'm not exactly going to be paying the most attention. I'm not going to lie. I'm not the biggest Zack Snyder fan.
no, but the characters are interesting to me. So,
I mean, you are
yeah.
the person with the Batman tattoo, so yes, you would say that.
Yeah, I would say that. And, Ben Affleck, great interpretation of Batman.
I am not going to go into that.
Well, take it from the man who's got the Batman tattoo on his arm. I think I prefer Ben Affleck's Batman to Christopher Nolan's Batman.
I don't disagree.
It's very rare we hear that, but yeah.
I'm not the biggest fan of Christian Bale and his weird baritone, so I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Robert Pattinson looks like he's going to do an infinitely more interesting performance than either of them, but we shall see.
Shall we wrap up on Tenet
Yeah,
then?
we should wrap up. Okay, so final verdict, Tom. Thumbs up, thumbs down. What are we thinking?
I mean, it's
Is
a
it worth
thumbs
getting
up. It's not
COVID-19 for?
bad for. Oh, I mean, there's very little worth getting COVID-19 for. Certainly not like a film like New Mutants. Is Tenet worth it? I don't know. I think I agree with you that yes, it's probably worth seeing in the cinema. Is it worth seeing it right now in this current moment? Hard to say. I'd give it a 3. I'd give it 3 stars. It was a fine film. It
Yeah.
just didn't change cinema, and I've not had like a life-changing experience from it. I don't remember big chunks of it now, and it's only been 3 or 4 days since I've seen it.
Yeah, I would also say very 3 stars. Not that memorable, but big spectacle, cool performances. Go watch it if you're bored and feel very safe doing so. Otherwise, I'd say
Wear a mask.
wait. Yes, please do. In any case, Tom, where would people find you online if they want to talk to you about the Snyder Cut?
If they want to talk to me about the Snyder Cut, you can have my personal phone number. So I can be found on the internet. If you just Google Tom Inniss, INNISS, you can find me basically anywhere. I'm the editor of Voice, so post opinions on there. Twitter, Instagram, all of it.
Tell Tom he's wrong on voicemag.uk and make him edit it. Okay, so today's episode was made possible by Voice Magazine, an online platform for young people interested in art and culture. You can read all the posts by that of Voice on voicemag.uk. You can find Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at voicemag.uk on all those platforms. Voice contributors also have our own Instagram account at voice.extra. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please consider helping us to make more with a donation of any amount at voicemag.uk/donate. If you can't help financially, it helps just to share stuff on social media, tell your friends, tell anyone, I don't know, tell your local Batman stan. If you're looking for another podcast to listen to, the Voice Magazine podcast has weekly interviews with artists and leaders in the creative sector. Lots of different stuff there, very interesting. Go listen, please. And thank you to Kevin MacLeod for the use of the track Shaving Mirror. You can find more of his work on incompetech.com. And last but not least, Tom Inniss is the executive producer of this podcast. So he can finally be on the podcast when I say he's the executive producer. And please direct all your love and or hatred towards him as the executive producer, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to have to take my headphones off because my head's getting too big now.
All right, we'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.